The Ministry of Community and Cultural Affairs is fundamentally about people. Therefore, the ministry is proud of its programs, Treasures, which brings to the fore facets of Bermuda's culture through the lives of people, our senior citizens. We treasure our seniors as they share their memories with us. They provide enrichment and show us the broad spectrum of our cultural mosaic. I hope that you will enjoy, as I shall, Treasures.
Captain H. Edward Williams is a man who wears two hats, one as a tour guide taxi driver and the other as a licensed sailboat skipper. When he's not showing visitors around by taxi, he sails them about in his 31-foot sloop, Lady D. We joined him at his home where he told us about his life. He begins by telling us about his early childhood and his parents.
Well, my father is named William Osmond Williams, and he was a grocer for many years. He was one of the oldest. He started as a child as a helper in Mrs. Kemp's garden. She kept a flower shop on Queen Street. And later he was moved to Front Street to O.R. Lobden's, which he managed with Mr. Loveland for many years in many of his branch stores. But now, next to my mother was Elizabeth Eve. She worked as a waitress at Victoria Lodge, which the present building is Victoria Building on Victoria Street, just the block of Victoria Street. And I don't know how they met, but they did make a very good couple. I was born on 31st of August, 1918, in Brooklyn, where the Brooklyn Bridge is today, which is just across the city parking lot. The canal runs through there. It's a little bridge going to the buildings on the hillside, which is called Brooklyn Bridge. And the rest of the family was born on Cox's Hill. My sister, older sister, I was her birthday present. I was born on her birthday. And the rest of us born in different parts where we left Pembroke. We always lived in Pembroke.
Captain Williams' interest in boats began at a very early age.
We moved from Cox's Hill down to Friswell's Hill, above the Central School. And I was very fond of boating. So I used to build little boats and play with them in the laundry tub after Mother was finished her laundry. And when I got a little bigger, I had the nerve to go down in the canal, which is the Marsh Folly, where the dump is. And there was a large pool of water, which we used to sail little boats across. Many boys used to do that, sail the boats out in the canal. Well, my first day at school, I'll never forget that, because I was left-handed. And my first day at school, the teacher said, no left-handers in my school. So she tied my left hand at the side of the chair, and I had to write with my right hand. And to this day, I don't write my left. In fact, I can't write with my left unless I press it. But I've been the right-hander ever since. I went on to the kindergarten school, and from the kindergarten school I went to the Berkeley Preparatory School, which is downstairs. It was the lower part of the Berkeley Institute, present Berkeley Institute. After I was there for a few years, after classes, the headmistress at the time was Miss Rosie Hinson. So I was a bit rough in my younger day there, and so the last term I was there, the teacher wrote a letter to my father and said that I'm getting too big for the school, so she'll send me upstairs, which was Papa Dick. It was Dick DeCosta. That was the Berkeley Institute upstairs. So I think I only stayed there 2 terms, which my father took me out to help him, help the family at that time. When I left school, I first started in masonry. My dad had me with a gentleman named Mr. Mency Richardson and Rennie Dolan. Those 2 were builders together, and I worked with them. So I worked with them for a few years. During that time, I was on a job at Gibbons Company on Queen Street. Mr. Gibbons decided to have a basement. The basement in the Gibbons Company building today was quite a job. I, as an apprentice and a few other boys, we used had to blast and dig that basement out under the building. We went below sea level. At low tide, we were able to work. In high tide, we had to move out. Yeah. But we managed to get it completed, and it's a dry basin ever since when we completed it. After we completed the basement of Gibbons Companies, I happened to retire from the job that we were doing, and I went to work with Mr. Gibbons himself in his stores. And while I was with Mr. Gibbons, he had a motorboat, and he used to do running around on the weekends. So he asked me to take care of the boat for him when I was off at weekends. So I used to run up the island and back. It was a motorboat at that time, but my favorite was at that time was the sailboat. So I got through with Mr. Gibbons, and then went over to Mr. Bert Darrell. I worked on Bert Darrell's slip for a long period. And while I was with Bert Darrell, I used to get around with some of the other boatmen which were in the charter business, and I used to go out with one particular chap. It's Earl Wilkinson. He showed me how to gave me lots of tips about sailing, and I caught on about sailing, and after a period of time I decided to try it out myself.
Mr. Williams was about to begin a new career on the water, with plenty of adventures along the way.
And a friend of mine, Morris Jones, and I went sailing several times up and down the harbor. And once we were going up the harbor, little did I knew the Queen of Bermuda was getting ready to go out. And we got up halfway up the harbor, and we suddenly capsized. So we was capsized in the middle of the harbor, and the ship was getting ready to come out there. So we scrambled and managed to get the boat upright and bailed out enough to just sail towards the Princess, get out of the channel. Other than that, I guess we were going out with the Queen. We used to hang around the each docks was either Hamilton Ferry docks, the Princess docks, the Inverary docks, Belmont docks. We used to jockey around looking for jobs. That's the way we used to get our work, by sailing around the various docks. And when we had no jobs, we got through with jobs sometimes. Especially on a Thursday afternoon in the summer months, the Sunday school picnics were always held at Darrell's Island or Port's Island. So they used to have the big ferries to take the parties up and down. So we had nothing to do after our jobs were finished. So we used to sail up the island and jockey around up to the island and take some of the girls and the boys out for sale.
It was during one of those excursions that Mr. Williams met his future wife, Valeria.
So a little later, I happened to meet two young ladies that were amongst the groups that I sailed many times. They used to come at the Old Boys Point, which is the park, sit out on the park there, and I cooked some along to go for a sail. And so one would go, but the other wouldn't go unless the second one would go. So the two of them used to go along with it until one evening I happened to get a little nerve, and I went to visit the one that I was more attracted to. So the lady said she didn't want to see me because I was the other lady's friend. So anyhow, her mother must have, her sister went to her mother and said, Mother said, gentleman want to see you, you better see him. So we started off from there. We courted for 3 years or so, and we got married, and we are now married for 56 years this year. And she was a wartime bride at the time, and the gifts at them days were Pyrex. Lots of Pyrex. Yes, we had lots of fun receiving our gifts, and we've had a very happy life ever since we have been married. So we have 3 children, which have grown up to be very good children to us. And they're all got a profession, and they're doing well in their profession. And we have 4 grandchildren, and they're on the way to do well in their future. Well, as I mentioned, we got married during the war. During the war, all our charter business and throughout the island practically shut down, tourist business especially, all tourist business. And the government started to get together on finding work for all the unemployed. I being on the water, a boatman, I tried to get a job on the water side. Pierre Patterson, he was an old flyer from the Royal Air Force. He lived on the island, and he suggested to form this flying school to train local boys for overseas that wanted to go in the overseas. And they got everything together. They brought in 2 Luscombe flying boats and an engineer, mechanic rather, a mechanic and a pilot, instructor pilot. And I was able to get the job as the boatman to take care of being it was operated on Darrell's Island, set up on Darrell's Island. They needed a boat for transporting up and down, and I took care of the boating operation. Took all the students up and back each day. During that time, they got that started. The Bermuda government and the American government and Great Britain were negotiating about having a base in Bermuda. As they got the survey all squared away, the engineers started bringing in materials for the construction. At that time, I was able to get a job with the construction workers, which was McGraw, Purdy, and Henderson. That was the company that started the bases. I went to get a job with running one of the launches, taking material and workmen up and down to the base, which was at Tucker's Island and Morgan's Island. They bulldozed the two of the islands down to join them up together. When it was completed, I was asked by the commander, Dietrich, to work for the Navy. So I did. I went with the Navy and I ran the commander's launch up until up to the period the base was being commissioned. When the base was commissioned, I then worked as a pilot for their crash boats. They hired two of our fast speedboats to be used as a crash boat. When the planes came in, we had to lay the courses for the landing at night and clear the lanes for them, and they would take off even during the day. New Year's night, they sent this boat out, the flying boat out. It was an emergency. They went out, and they weren't out too long before they called them back in. So when we had the landing lights down for the return, so we went out. The tower asked us as the crash boat to make sure the lane was clear. We cleared the lane and located with the tower. So the tower gave us the signal that the plane was approaching. So we waited out in the area off the lane, and we saw the plane making its approach. And I'll never forget that particular night because it was the blackest night I've ever seen on the water. So we waited and waited, waited. It didn't. When we did, we called the tower back to let them know that we had no sign of it. And they said, well, go and try and search the base, see if you see the lights anymore. Well, as we circled and used our spotlight and circled around the bay, we come across this white streak right across the island, which the plane had hit the Alpha Island and made a path right through it. And then the wingspan came across to the other side of the island, which when our lights, searchlight hit it, that was what we saw, the wingspan. We notified the tower that the plane had crashed. They said, well, go and investigate. So we went into the area where the plane's wings were, and there were several voices we heard, moaning, and we were able to go right into the wreckage and picked up five men. And one we picked up died just as we picked him up, got him on board the boat. We were all very fortunate the plane had set depth charges on, and neither one of them went off. And in the end of the year, of that particular year, the crew and myself was awarded a citation from the commander. After the war ended, in fact, I stayed at the base until the war ended. When the tourism started back to Bermuda, they started to arrange the hotels for tourism again. I put in my discharge for the base to go back to my business, which was charter business. So I was able to, I had sold my boat during the war, but I also had another boat in mind, which I went all the way to St. David's to see a gentleman that owned this Bermuda boat, which is called the Irma. I always wanted this boat, and I said, well, I'll try Mr. Hedden out. Mr. Charles Hedden, he owned a large house in St. David's. He's an American. And I approached him, and he told me, yes, you can have it. So I sailed her up until the days of fiberglass came around. After the war, the island was, everyone was so interested in motorization that most of the dignitaries had the pleasures of roaming the island in the United States government and construction officials in the cars that they had. So the first debate that was debated on in the House after the war was motorization. Before we had registered taxis with plates and meters, I started to drive in '46. By the time they got things regulated, it was '47 when I received my taxi license and number, which is 1238, came on the road, 37. And I've been driving ever since. During my driving periods, I received a first award, 25 year from the TCD. And since which, the tourism presented me with an award for the time I've been dealing with the locals and the tourists. And to my surprise, a few years back, I was honored by the Queen on the Queen's birthday. And that was at Government House I received the honors.
Captain Williams' love of the sea has taken him on many ocean crossings, including the Newport Bermuda races with the late Tobiah Dill. These trips were never without their share of thrills and spills.
1960 was our first Newport race, and I was skipper for Tobiah. And we set sail off the yacht club right off there. We went down the harbor to make a grandstand view of us leaving Bermuda. The Donchery was the name of the boat then. She had a very large red spinnaker, so it would be a spinnaker take off from the harbor. So I, being the deck man for the spinnaker, I had all the rigging right, all rigs set in order when we were to set the sail, it was in order. But we had a gentleman on board, which I often call him the octopus, because his hands was everywhere. and you call for anything, his hands was there. So so we lined up to go out of the harbor, and Sophia says, "Set the spinnaker, let her go." Well, he broke this. Just about the time we went to break the spinnaker, I happened to look forward and see the sheet, spinnaker sheet, was hooked up under the pulpit at the bow. I rushed forward, unclipped it from the spinnaker, foot of the spinnaker, reclipped it, and just as I reclipped it, she popped open. When she popped open, I went over the side with it. As she blew, I went right over the side. Within seconds, I was back in the boat. And Sophia didn't even know I had been overboard. And I felt my wallet. My wallet wasn't even wet. We also, on that trip, we had the governor of Bermuda, Governor Gascoigne. That was the beginning. We made it to Newport in good fashion, and we prepared the boat in Newport, ready for the return race. We had a very good send-off start, and we were doing very well. We were 3/4 of the way here to Bermuda. The whole fleet ran into a storm, very, very high winds in the storm, and we. At midnight, after midnight, our mast blew up. So we were stranded. Presently, I'm still taxiing and also hope to do my boating. As the season starts, I hope to be able to continue with my charter work.
We asked Captain Williams what advice he would give young people today.
I will say this much. I see this every day happening, that lots of the boys and girls is not as sociable and friendly as they should be, like the old Bermuda. The old Bermuda, you were, regardless of the racial talk you may hear, but we never had the squabbles and the threats that we are having today with youngsters. If I were them, I would try and get along with everyone, regardless of color, and I'm sure things will be far better than trying to pick the choices in color. But the best way to get along is to be happy and work together. I think it will make Bermuda a better place than it is right now if the workers got along together, management get along together with the workmen, and that will mean a lot to the island as a whole.
These wise words come from a man who has spent a lifetime sharing his love for the sea and for Bermuda with others. This makes him one of our island's most valuable treasures.